Okay, so today we're gonna go to a new section, not a section, but a new week. So we have 4 sections, as you can see here. We're gonna go to this forms and class. So we're gonna start with the new lesson today, which focuses on forms. We'll be talking about forms, how to build forms. Most of you remember how you build forms in the HTML and CSS. So inshallah that we're gonna practice that today, and we're gonna do it in the React way, inshallah. So in this lesson today, we're gonna cover how to build a form with basic HTML. We're gonna use onChange function to capture the inputs of when you input something in the form. We're gonna utilize the form submit event to work with the form data. And also we're gonna demonstrate the ability to handle multiple inputs. And we're gonna use controlled inputs. This is a important aspect of React. When we talk about forms, you need to have a controlled form, and you don't want to have a form that is by default when you submit it refreshes the page. So, and we're gonna talk about that, inshallah. Yeah, so today is all about forms. I'm gonna open Code Sandbox. I'm gonna start a project just to set up. So I'll leave it as this. I'll set it up in a minute. Welcome, guys. I think it's it's the same. Okay, so I thought somebody new came. So forms. I need your help, guys, to help me with the setup of a form, a basic form. So let's go to like CodeBen, and we're talking about HTML, not even React. We're talking about HTML. We need to set up a basic HTML form. We need to have at least 2 inputs, one button, and we need to have we need to make it so that it has the types for the inputs, and also just the basic stuff that you already know. So somebody help me set up a form here. What do we start with when we're building a form?
You're gonna start with the form tag.
Yep, we're gonna start with the form tag. Yep, so just the form tag, and we can close the form tag. So this is basic HTML. It's not React or anything. Let's create 2 inputs, one for like a username and one for a password. How do we do that?
You're gonna do you're gonna create input.
Input, okay.
Then say type.
And
you're gonna put like text.
Okay.
Then you're gonna put a name.
Name, okay. This will be username, something like that.
Close.
Okay. Close it here.
You can add if you want a placeholder, stuff like that.
Yeah, so there you could add more stuff. So placeholder here, and you could say here username. You could write whatever you want there. So as you can see here, it already rendered for us. The next one would be for the password. So how do we do this one?
Same thing. You're gonna, instead of the name, instead of the type, you're gonna make password.
So we're gonna make the type password. Okay. So and then name, we can call it password. And a placeholder, you could call it password. And here we can close it like that. Okay, let's create a button. How do we create a button?
You're gonna say button, open yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then close it like that. Okay, and let's go to submit button. So as you can see, we created a basic form. Now this form, the issue with this form is, of course, it's not connected to anything. So it's not connected to the backend. It's not connected to anywhere. But the main thing we need to understand is the types. Remember that we can have different types. There's hundreds of types right now, actually. So text is one type, which is generic text. So it could be any type of text. And password is a password. So when you type it, it has like little dots, and the text is just a normal text. We could have different things. Like, let's say we want to have here, we want people to put something like a number. We could say here number. And when they type here something, it will not type any text. So it will only type a number. You could have an email one. Right now, and this could be like a phone number or something like that. HTML5 added a email feature, so that when you put an email here, it will make it easy for you to know, to force the person this is an email. So when they type something like that and they leave it, I'm not sure about CodeBin, but in a normal HTML, it will not allow the person to submit. So let's try here. See, so even without us doing any verification. So usually before HTML5, you have to use JavaScript to verify, to say, okay, when they add email here, make sure it's an actual email. And the way to check an email is it has to have like a at something else.com or something like that, right? So, but yeah, so they added in HTML5 by default, it has that email feature. So there's a lot of them. There's address one. There's like there's a bunch of them. So the main ones is text, email, number, password. Those are like the common ones that people use. Another thing about the button is there's a different way to do the button too. You could create an input and say type, because button is a type, and here say submit. If you say submit type, then by default this is a button. It becomes a button, right? You could also add a value here so that you could change the value. Instead of submit, you could say sign up, and that will change that. So you don't have to have a button as a button here. So there's a different ways to do. So this is basic form. This is how you submit. This is how you write a form. In the backend, like when you want to submit this form to a database, you have to add something here, something like a method. After the method, and say either get or post. So remember, you were doing like the Axios.get and the Axios.post. You didn't do the Axios.post, but you did Axios.get. It's the same get. So same get as here as the Axios one. So this means whatever you submit here, get that data and then submit it to something else. So the first one is, I mean, you don't need to know this because Reactor doesn't have this, but the first option is to say get or post, and the next one is to say action and point to wherever you want to submit this form. So whatever data that comes from here, you want to send it to this action, and this action could be like something like process or something like that, .php or other languages, or .python or something like that. So this is a basic form, and most of you know how it works. So let's go back to our training material here. So here, overview, form in a website and web applications have been around for a long time. So when it comes to forms, I think forms were like the second thing that was created when browsers were created. So I think the first one was links. So that's why there's a hyper, when we say HTML, we say hyper text markup language, because the main purpose of a website is to create a link between different pages. So that's the first thing was the guys who were working on basically the internet, they created a links and then they added form. So the next thing was, how do we send something? People were asking, and then they created a form. So form was kind of like the oldest thing that were introduced to browsers. they are one of the best ways for companies to gather data for their users and to get your users interact with your software. Every language and framework will handle form data a bit differently. Okay, so in summary, form contains interactive controls, form elements, and the input is the interactive control used to collect the data from the user, and the label is how we caption the input, provide a better experience for users. So yeah, so forms have also labels. We didn't actually look into that, but let's say we want to create a label for this. Who can help me with that? A label. It's pretty simple. We just say label, right?
Yeah, label tag, HTML tag.
Link in the spell and the label like that. And then we say here name or username label. So label can have a something else too. It could have something called, in HTML recently was added, let's see, label for HTML. So labels, they have a something that was added recently called for HTML or for. Let's see here. Not that. I think it's called for. Yeah, I think it's called for. So basically the way it works is inside here you say for, and then you say username. And here, instead of the name, you could keep the name if you want. You could say ID, username. In this way, this label, the reason why this is used right now is when it comes to like devices that devices that read the website, devices that people who are blind use, and also for like Google and search engines, it makes it easy which label belongs to which input, right? So this label belongs to this input. I mean, it's easier to read this, but what if this input doesn't have anywhere where it says username? So the name could be something like Maga, you know, like something else different. And here it could be like Maga Gili, you know, for other languages, something like that. So now, if you don't have this, and this says username, if you want, you can say username, and you don't have this ID at all, and here would be name, right? How would you know if this input belongs to this label? There's, you know, it's very hard to know. So that's why we have the for to clearly identify which label belongs to which input. So that was that's why it was introduced. So yeah, so that's forms, and that's, you know, inputs and stuff like that. So let's get to our lesson today. Let me know if you have any question before we start. Let me know. Okay, so let's go to our code sandbox. This is a clean code sandbox project. I didn't add anything to it. So what we're going to do is, first thing we're going to do is we're going to change the styling. So I'm going to grab some CSS. And we're going to change this, right? So, and it's going to change the background and the text, stuff like that for us. So that's the styling. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure our app.js is a little bit better. What do we need is here, we need to, before we do that, actually, let's create a like empty components, basically. So here we're going to go and create components. Component, is that how it's spelled? Component, right? Components. Inside the components, we're going to create two components. One, I will call it nodes.js, and the other one would be node form.js. So this one will render the nodes for us. So we're actually creating, let's go back, we're actually creating an application that you could submit a note, basically like a to-do list or note taking. So you have a form, you write the title of the note, and then you write the text, the body, and then it will render, it will show cards for you. So it will have cards here, and we already have the CSS for it, so it will show the cards. So in here, let's create a basic basic component. We can kind of copy this one. We don't need to re-render the whole thing, to create the whole thing again, and import React from React. And here, gonna change it to notes. Let's give it the title of all notes here, or something like that. Let me see what I gave originally. Yeah, just all notes is fine. Let's save that. And this one is going to be a form. So let's say note form. And of course, bring in React. Import React from React. All right. This we're just gonna say just a form. Okay. So we have those set up. In the app.js, let us let's see, what do we need in there? Let's import React to start with. React from React. So we're gonna do a couple of some setup so that you guys can see what I'm doing. And I'm starting from scratch. So this is just a clear install. So you can see what I'm doing if I want to set up an application. So in here, so I'll say here, other imports. On top of that, I'll say import components. Okay, so let's import those two components. So I'll say import nodes from components and then slash nodes. And the other one was import node form from. Okay, so that's that. We didn't use them yet, so that's fine. Before we move on, let's create a actually, let's just skip that. It might complicate more. I was gonna add some data on a separate file so we can render the data, but it's not a lot of data. It's just a one input. So we don't need to do that. We can just put it right in this state. So in here, let us bring in the forms. So let's call this, what do we call it? Let's call this my notes. Right. Let's import the, first we're gonna import the node form. Node form. And secondly, we'll bring the other one, nodes. Okay, so that should work. And save it. I'm not, oh, okay, it shows here. Why is it so big? Oh, the reason why it's so big is because we're using the same CSS as the home page. So instead of app here, we need to use something else. So this would be node list. No, a node list. Okay. So node list, and this one would be, let's see. This will not have anything, so let's just get rid of that. Okay. So we are good now. So my notes, and then we're gonna have a form here, and we're gonna have all the notes here. So these texts will be something that you can see. Okay, now I need your help. I need to set up a state for the notes. How do I do it? How do you set up a state? Who can walk me through like a basic state for the form?
You're gonna put a constant
Comes to, okay,
and you're gonna open brackets.
brackets, okay. We're gonna call them notes, right? So we're gonna call them notes. So these are the notes that are gonna show
And then you're gonna say set notes.
the notes. Okay,
And you're gonna bring in use state.
use state.
And then
Okay,
open array.
so where do I bring in use state?
Import up top.
Top, okay, so from React, right?
Yep.
And what is use state? What exactly is it?
Hook, React hook.
React hook. So use state is a React hook, and React has a lot of hooks, especially the React functional component. So if you go React hooks, you see there's a list of them here. So state one is right here, use state. So React hook essentially is a function that is hidden from us, and it's created by React, and it does things for us like setting the state, changing the state, all those things. Another thing is it's always good practice to start with an empty array. The reason for that is you want to loop through the data that's coming from the state. So to loop through, the data needs to be inside an array. So actually, let's put a fake data in here. So I'm going to put this fake object inside there. I already have the object. So it's an object with an ID, title, and body. And let me actually move this to a new page like that, and hide this. So as you can see the whole thing. So this is just a text. So now we have our state. The next thing would be we need to render that state. We need to send it to nodes. How do we do that? How do we send it that state to the nodes? Who can help me with that?
Through props.
Through props. Okay, good. So where do we put the props? Where do we add the props?
Line
Where
24.
Which line?
24.
Line 24.
Yeah.
Remember that node form is the component that handles the forms. It doesn't handle the data, the nodes that's going to show up.
No, it's $25.
25. So this one is the one that's going to show up the nodes. The node form is the one that handles the form. So it's just gonna add data to the nodes. So in here, how do we pass a props? How do we pass the state as a prop?
You declare prop in the component, and then you put it right there.
Okay, so I declare here props, right? And then what do I put in here?
Any custom name.
Okay, let's call it something like notes, the same name as the data.
And then you call for the state.
You call the
Put
state.
in a parenthesis. Yeah.
Okay. And then I call the state notes, right?
Yeah, we call.
So this state right here is what we put right here. But this one could be anything. It could be something like writing, or it could be my notes, something like that, right? Could be anything here. So we could actually keep in my notes here. Let's just do my notes. Save it. Now, how do we retrieve these props? How do we render them on here? Where do we go when we pass the props? Where do we go next?
You're gonna go to the component that's gonna receive.
Okay, so this is the component that's gonna receive. We already added props. How do we verify that we received props?
You console log the data.
Console log the data. So you always console log it just to check
The
you're actually
props.
receiving anything. So you could give it a name here if you want. You can say props. To just to verify that you're actually receiving something. Otherwise, you're going to be working in blind and you don't even know what's happening. So props is here. And always it's best to name your console logs. We are receiving something here. We are receiving my notes, which is the prop that we created. And it has something inside it. It has one thing. It has the data. So that's what we're looking for. So that's how you pass props. All right, so our data is in here. Now we need to render it here. Let me see so we have the div with that. We don't need this title. We need to render inside here. How do we render it? Remember, we could have multiple nodes. So what do you need to do if you have a lot of nodes, a lot of objects?
Loop through.
Loop through it. And keep in mind that if you are in the JSX, which is this section, you need to have a JavaScript expression. Mapping over something is a JavaScript, so you cannot do JavaScript in here unless you put those curly brackets. So we say props dot, what do we put here?
Map.
Map here, okay. Does everyone agree with that?
Now note, we're gonna say.
Remember we passed the props here?
The props, yeah, the prop name.
So the prop name before the map. So that would be my notes dot map. And we do the usual map, which is we could do function or an arrow function. Let's do an arrow function. So I'll just call it the note here because it's a specific note that we're gonna target. And here we're gonna say just like that. Okay, and here, let's do that. So inside here, we need to render the note. So let me put some CSS before we move on. So the first CSS would be class name equal to note. And let me close this div. Okay. Inside this div, we need to render two things. We need to render an H2. So I'm gonna put the H2 here. I'm not gonna put any data yet. Give it a class name of title, which I already did in the CSS. So it's already set up. And this would be, let's just call it title for now. Title here, H2. And here we're gonna render a paragraph. And here I'm gonna say body text. Okay. So let's save this and go back to our app. And as you can see, it's rendering. So this is the text. So what do we change here? What do we put here instead of title? We want to render the data that we just saw. We want to render this. We want to render this title and this body. How do we do that? In here.
You open parenthesis, curly
Brackets. Okay.
bracket, yeah. And then the note. Is it note? I think.
Note. Okay.
The problem.
Yeah.
And the title.
The title. No. What about the body? And this is the name of the body. Same thing.
Body, note dot body, I guess.
Good.
I'm not sure though.
Okay, let's save. Let's test it out. Okay. So let's see what it shows.
I think we have to.
Okay, so it shows what we're looking for, right? So this is the note. This is each note. So if we have multiple ones here, so let's copy and paste like maybe 2 of them and change the data. So this is an object, normal object. Let's change this one to 2 and 3 And here, let's say another happy note. And this one we could just name whatever, happy note text. Okay. Last happy note. Okay, save it. As you can see, it renders each card. The reason for that is we have a map here. It's mapping over those objects that we created, right? And the note is each object. So each object, we give it the name note. So that's why we say note.title, and that will render the title, note.body, and that will render the body, right? Any question about that?
Man,
Hmm.
why are we putting like two divs here?
It's just for the sake of organizing how this is going to look like.
For CSS purpose?
Yeah, it's a CSS purpose. So if we just get rid of everything, if we put if we put one div, because we need a parent div, and we get rid of this, and we get rid of that, and actually we need to have a div here. So in here, imagine this is a return. So this is implicit return. Remember that an arrow function, if you don't write the return, it's implicit, it's already there, but it's hidden. So each return has to have, in JSX, it has to have a parent element. So that's why we have to have these two divs, and they have to have these two divs. So return here and another return here. So imagine this is like a return like that. But yeah, if you save like this, it's not gonna look good. It's gonna look like that. But yeah. So for CSS, but also for we have to have something here. So we have to have a parent element. You could give it a paragraph here if you want, give it something else, but you have to have a parent element here and then a parent element here. And so we have it like that.
And if for the things you're gonna display, like right now we're showing a note, and we're showing the body and the title, right?
Yeah.
So each one you're gonna put like H2 or key tag, something like that, element.
So the title is H2, so which is right here. This title is H2, and the body is just a paragraph, which is just this text, right?
So in case if we would have like, let's say you have a picture, for example, you're gonna put like image and then
Yeah. So this is the data that we're rendering, and if we have more stuff here, if we have something like where is it? So we have this, and we say come here. We have here image. Then we need to have like the image link here. So something like a URL, something like that. Let's just call it image here, right? Now, if we want to render the image, we go to here and we say, we can say something like an image source. And then we put, actually, we don't have to put the quotation. We put here node.image. And we need alt for it to render image. And here we close it, right? Did I do something wrong? Let's see. Source, alt, image is self-closing, so redundant alt attributes. Okay. Let's call it something like so. I don't know why it's not allowing me to do that. So now, if you go back here, you see here. So because we don't have any image, so it's not rendering anything. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes, man. Yes, it's very.
Yeah. So whatever we put in here, it's gonna come from there. Also, as you can see here, there's nothing here. I mean, it's shown here because it's assuming that these have the same thing. So let's remove that. Any question before we move on? Okay, so that's the rendering of the nodes. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to create the form. So let's go to the form component. In here, we need to do a couple of things. Before we do anything else, we need to create a state for the form. So just like the app.js, we need to create a basic state where it manages the form. So this is separate from the one in here. This one handles the nodes. So it handles all the nodes. And the one we create in here handles the inputs. So whatever we receive from the inputs, it's going to be handled here. So we're going to say const, let's call form node, set form node. Use state. We could give it an object if we want like that. I'll give it object for now. And the object, we have to put a empty data here. We have to put a template. So the template would be the same template as here. So it has to be exact same as here, but with no data. So it has to be ID, title, and body. So ID, we're gonna give the ID date dot now. Who can tell me what date dot now does? What is it trying to do?
I'll give you an object, the date object.
Okay.
As a number.
Okay, as a number. Okay, that's very close. So it will give you the date that right now, the date today, right? What else?
It gives you like the unique ID.
Okay, so ID here, we want something unique, right? So it gives us a unique number, and that number is today's date and today's, like right now, the hour, the minutes, and the seconds. So that's what it gives us.
It'll keep changing.
Yeah, in a one number. So that means it's going to be unique every second, right? So it's very useful, especially for like small projects, small applications. You could use this as a unique ID because it changes every second and it never returns to the same thing. But if you're writing a bigger application for like a company or something like that, you're going to be using something called universal ID. What's it called? Universal unique ID identifier. So this is you could say React here, and there is here UUID. So it's a package that you could download, and it gives you 100% unique ID. There's not going to be another ID the same in the world. But for us, this is enough. Title here, we're going to leave it empty, and body, we're going to leave it empty. So this is a blueprint for our form. So it's going to know what to actually what to actually submit, and we have to bring it in the use state. Okay. All right. So these underline means that we haven't used this, so that's why they're underlined. All right. So let's set up a basic form so we can show something. In here, we're going to remove this whole div thing. Let's remove this whole thing. And we're going to say form, close the form. Remember, this is just a normal HTML style. This is not HTML, this is JSX, but we're following exactly the same way that HTML does. Let's create a label. Let's let a label be title. Okay, input. This would be type text. And we can name it. Let's name it like a title here. You could give it a placeholder and stuff like that, but it's fine. For now, another label, and this would be body, or yeah, let's call it body. Input. This one will be different because we want to have a bigger space. We're going to use text area. So this is a different way of different input where you have a bigger space to add data or text or something like that. Name, this one doesn't need a type because you already set the type here. So we'll say name baddie and keep it at that for now. We will add a couple more things later. We also need a form. We also need a button here. So let's add a button. Okay, give it a type, submit. Here, let's call it add note button. Okay, so let's save this. Go back to our app. As you can see, we have a title. Here we have a baddie. This one we have. Can add more stuff here. We zoom in, and we have the note here. So now nothing works. It's gonna refresh the whole thing if I say add. As you can see, that is something we need to work on. We don't want it to refresh. We want every time we add something here, we want it to add in here. Let's remove all those fake data. Let's actually remove all of it for now. Okay. So that would be our app. Yeah, so we have the form. Now what we need to work on is how do we add something to the notes. Okay, so the next thing is we need to handle the input. So we need to make sure there's a function that takes care of every time we make changes to the input, so that we know what we're changing and we update the state every time there's changes to the input. We also need we need two functions here. So let's write a note here. We need two functions. Sorry about that. Function one will be called the handle change. So this is how it's usually called, handle change. The reason for that is it takes care of all the changes. So any change you make here, it will keep track of that. So handle change. So this tracks of all changes to input. And the next function would be function two. This will this is called a handle submit. So this tracks accepts, let's say, accepts submission. So when you hit submit, this runs. So this function runs when you hit submit on this button. So when you say add node, that function runs and makes sure that it takes all the data that you input here, and then it takes it to all the way to here, and it adds it to the state here automatically. We also need a third function in here in the app.js, which will allow us to add the nodes to here. So let's actually write that here. Function 3, that would be add nodes from node form, handle submit function to nodes state. So hopefully that makes sense, because we're going to create a function here which accepts the change, all the information we submitted here, and that will be handled by handle submit. Handle submit will take all that data, it will make it an object, and then it will send it to here, to this function. And this function will say, okay, I have a new data. That new data, I need to add it to the state. And you know how to add things to the state. You have to use set nodes, right? So it will run the set node. It will say, I have a new object for you. Add this object to the list. And that will show there. And then the node will be rendered here. Hopefully that makes sense. That's our to-do right now. But let's take a break, come back, and get started with the functions. And when we're done with the functions, then that's it. That's it for today. So let's take a break, 10 minutes, and then come back, inshallah. See you soon. Okay, let's get back to it. All right. So hopefully you guys can hear me.
Yes, we can, Mark.
Okay, sounds good. All right, let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is we need to add the handle change, which is how we handle the changes that happen to the input. But before we do that, we need to add a little bit to the input itself. So the best way to kind of visualize it is by changing how the input looks like. So we're just gonna move this to the next line, and then move this to the next line like that, and move this to the last like that. So the input is going to be like that, and then we're going to have what we need here. We need a value. So each input needs to have a value. So the value will be the state. So the value will be this state. We need the title and the body, right? So the value for this one would be the name of the state, which would be form note dot title. That will be the title. That will be the value. So every time we have something in that input, it will also show the state. So if there's anything in the state, it will show in the form, and vice versa. So these are connected right now. This input is connected to the title here. So that would be the first thing we will need. is the value. We could also have a placeholder if we want, so it doesn't matter. You could have as normal, you could say placeholder. You could say enter title, something like that. We can have the for here. So the for will be in React will be HTML4, and that would be because for in programming for is a like for loop, so you don't want to mix the two. So in React they call it HTML4, but in normal HTML it's just a for. So this would be like title, and we have to add here an ID. The order doesn't matter. The ID will be title. Okay, so the next thing is we need to create the function. So when we have this, we need to, every time we make changes, we need that function to run. So to create that function, we're gonna go here and we're just gonna create a normal function. So we're gonna make this function an arrow function. So let's call it handle change. And this is how in React in general, this is how it's called. You don't have to call it handle change, but if you look at bigger projects, if you look anywhere, you will see that the changes that happen to the form, the function that handles that is called handle change. It's a uniform thing. So in here, we're gonna pass one thing called event. An event will be whatever that's happening in here. So that will be the changes that's happening. So handle change event. So here, inside here, what we need is we need to keep track of the changes. The best way to keep track is first number one is to grab the value. Then the next thing would be when you grab the value, you need to add it to the state. And remember that every time we want to add something to the state, the first thing we need to do is we need to copy the state, and then we need to use the set to add something to the state. So those are the two steps we need to do. So the first thing is to grab. To grab it, we need to have a variable. So this variable will be something like new input. So that would be the input that comes from the form, this form. So new input. New input. Now, this is an object. Inside this object, first thing we need to do is we need to use something called spread operator. And keep in mind that this is not easy. Like it doesn't have to be, most people have a hard time figuring this out. It took me a while to figure this out. So it's fine if you don't understand it on the first time. But we're gonna break it down. So the first thing we need to do is we need to grab this state. This is state. So we're gonna say form node. So form node, we have it here, but we do not want to directly change the state. We want to copy it. And one way to copy the state is using spread operator. Spread operator, I don't know if you guys heard before this. So if you go here, spread operator and JavaScript
method, yeah.
So I think you guys heard about this before. It's a way to copy data like an object or an array and have a copy of that. It's a shallow copy. So it's not a direct, like exact copy. It's a sort of like, you have to understand like how objects work, the reference for objects and stuff like that, which we will talk about in the future. But it's just a copy of your state, of your object. So a spread operator allows an iterable such as an array expression or a string to be expanded in places where 0 or more arguments. So this is just, it's talking about other things, but all it does is it takes a, this is not a good example. So here, this is a good example for an array. And keep in mind that arrays are actually objects too. So that's that. So this is an array. And then what we did was we want to combine this array with these letters, with these numbers. To do that, you just write your numbers and then you say dot, 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 3 dots, and then this array. That means combine these two. So add them together, and this is what you get, right? So that's what spread is, spread operator. Okay, so we copy our state, and then the next step is we need to identify what we need to change, right? So for the first one is the title, right? So we need to do something like here, this would be like title, and then this would be whatever that we input here. So that would be something like event dot target. Remember that event dot target is this input, and then we need to target something, and that would be the value. So whatever the value shows, that's what we need to change. Value, right? So this event dot target is the input, this part, and then we specified more, and we said whatever is in the value, set it to the title. Does that make sense to you guys? So this is the state, right? This is the whole state. We copied the whole state, and we said we want to change one thing, which is the title. Okay, and the value for the title, which is empty right now, is event.target.value, which is this value. So event.target is always whatever you click in. In JavaScript, event.target, even in normal JavaScript, event.target is the object or the element you're actually targeting or you're clicking, right? So that value means the value for that input. Does that make sense to you guys?
Okay, so for the spread operator, it's used to combine two objects, two data, right?
You could do that too. You could also copy a data from another. You could get the copy of an object or an array, just like we showed here. We got a copy of this array right here.
Mm-hmm.
This is a copy, and then we combine the copy with these. Okay, so it's a copy of this one. But basically, this copy, what it's doing is it's making it so that you could access each one of them, right? So it's like basically saying odd index 1, index 0, I mean, odd index 2, index 1, and then odd index 3 or 2. So this is exactly the same as that. Would that make sense? Any question about this part? Yes.
What is this value? Is
Yeah.
that the output?
So the value part is this value right here. And that value will be whatever we input here. So whatever we input here, we can't put in here. Whatever we input here is the value. This text is the value. Right?
Input, okay.
Yeah. So the text that you input is the value. Right? So so we're taking that value and we're setting it to title. Right? Any question about that? We're gonna take it to another level. We're gonna change one thing from here, and then that will take it to another level. Make it so that we don't have to write. Right now we're targeting a title. If we want to target baddie, we don't have any baddie here, so there's no baddie. So to do that, we have to do again baddie. What if you have a lot of inputs here? Then you have to write all of them. So to make that easier, there's something that we can target. So that will make it easier. But I want you to understand this part first. What is it doing? Any question about this part? Okay. So let's see who's here who didn't talk. Fadum, I'm gonna pick on you.
Okay, no problem.
Can you explain for me what this is doing? Just in your own words.
Wait, one second.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. So it's copying the form note, which is the use state, and the information in that form note, it has the title, but because you use the spread operator, I think when you console log it, I think it'll copy the
Yeah.
original form note, but it will also make a new copy of it.
Yeah. It'll make
So then-
a copy of the state, which is a form note.
Then it will say the old use state, the old information in form note, and it'll show the new one. But this time, I think you're changing the title.
Yep. So
But I
we're
don't know how you're changing the title.
so we're targeting the title. So this copy is, we're basically saying we need to have a copy here, but we need to attach something to it. We need to add something to it, which is
Yeah,
which is the title with a value. So now this title will be overwritten. This empty title will be
overwritten.
Will be
But
overwritten.
how do you? Where's event.target.value coming from?
So event.target is our input. So this whole input,
the input value, whatever you put
yeah,
on the
this-
center from the
Oh,
input.
so the
okay,
value,
okay.
we're targeting the value. So event.target is this part. And remember that
Okay.
event we passed as a parameter to the function. So
Yeah.
whenever we click, remember in JavaScript, when you say add event listener, you use
Yeah.
event to target.
So this is for.
Yeah.
Is this for the submit button?
This
The
is
handle
for
change on click.
Yeah, so this is the handle. No, this is the handle change, which is any change that happens in here. So if we make any changes here, if we add like hi, then it will grab that hi without us submitting
Okay.
it yet.
Okay.
So
Got it.
before we submit, it will grab that and it will put it to here. And eventually we need to take all this and submit it to our, our nodes. So
Okay,
we want to
got
send, but before we do that, we need to grab all the information and put it all together.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So now,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah, so now we're targeting a title. We need to make this more generic so that we can target the body and the title at the same time. And even if you add more here, it will automatically target that too. To do that, we need to use the name here. So we're going to say event.target.name, and that name would be, it has to be the same as the state here. It has to be the same as these. So here we got to change the title and change it to event.target.name. Okay, so here we actually have to put this in a array like that. The reason we put it in an array is because it is it's not allowing us to use it in the object. So we're inside an object, and you cannot have a key value of an object, which is something like this, something dot. You cannot have that. So it's like saying here title dot something else, and then using that as a key. That will not work in an object, but this will work if you make this an array. That will work in general, in principle.
So are you doing both for the body and title and the title at the same time?
Yes. So in here, it's targeting the
Okay.
name. So every time you change the input and you say, you go from the title and you go to the body, it will automatically switch to the body.
They both have the name, name.
Yep, they both have a name here. So this name is equal to body. And now it will say, oh, you're talking about body. Okay, here, I'm going to change it to body here. So, and then it's going to target the value. You have to add a value here eventually, which is for the body. So we're going to add a value here too. This would be form node. So this is from the state dot body. So now we have this and we're targeting this. So now let's actually console log this. So let's make a console log here. And console log new input, which is our variable here. So let's save that. Let's go back here. Go to our console. I think I have to say here, just errors and all this. We can remove all that. So now if we add something here, so let's say new, oh, okay, we're missing something. We have to add this function handle change to the input. So the input has to know where it's sending the data, right? So in here, we say on change when there's a change. If we change anything in this input, then go to this function. That's what we're telling it. So any change that happens in here, trigger this function called handle change. And that's it. Save it. Go back here. Now, if we add something here, new, it's not even showing. It's not showing. Okay. I think the reason it's not shown is because we have to send the data to the state. So right after the console log, we need to send it the data from here to the state. How do we change the state? How do we change it?
You're gonna set form node.
We're gonna use
set. Okay.
We're gonna use the set form node to change the state, and all we need to do is we need to pass this data, the new data.
Input.
New input. So that will mean that we can write something here. So clear this new node. So as you can see, it's keeping track of any changes that happens right here. And just the title, we're not doing the body yet. So just for the title, and as you can see here, it's keeping track of the ID too. So if you write something here, test, as you can see, it's keeping track of every letter. So it's saying T is test, and then it's console log and all that. So that's what it means to handle change, to handle any changes that happen to the input. That's what it means. So now we have to do the same thing for the body. We have to add all the things that we need. So let's make it look nicer. We need to add the handle change too. So here, let's add, we can skip the HTML4, no problem. But let's add the name. We have the name, and we have the value. We don't need much actually. Let's add the handle change. So on change is equal to that function handle change. Okay, I don't think we need much. Placeholder, yes, we need a placeholder. Let's call it here. What did I put?
And ID maybe.
ID. What do you mean?
For the label.
Yeah. So we could add that too. I mean, it's not necessarily 100%. It's only for like devices and things like that. But it's good practice to add that. So body. Here we can add ID. It's a good practice. Okay. So save that. And that should work for the body too. So now if we write something in the body, it should keep track of that. So let's say this is your new body text. Like as you can see here, it's keeping track of it. So now we took care of the input. So now we know what's happening in the inputs. So we're tracking everything, but still nothing is gonna happen if we submit. So if we submit, it's gonna refresh the whole thing. That's because we're not handling the submission yet. So that's the next function. So any question about this function? Let's remove this console log. Any question about what's happening in here?
I still don't get it. The new input, the things, the spread operator, how you use it, but you explain it. I know you can't explain more.
Yeah,
logically, it won't make sense to me, like how you're combining two values, but it's only outputting one value out of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's not easy to understand. This is usually the hard part to understand. if I explain it in a different way, maybe I can show some drawing and that might make a little more sense. Let's see. So I have my
It's good. It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So I'm just gonna try drawing and see if that helps. So let's say, let's undo that. Let's say we have a state. So a state is, let's say, a box. So let's create a box here. So this is our state, and we have a title here as one box, and we have the body here as another box. All right. So if we are making changes to this, we have to use the set state. But now we're not making changes directly to the state. What we want is we want to create something new. We want to create a new state, a copy of the state. So if we want to create a copy of this state, we have to copy this state. We have to send it down and copy it and create something new. So this would be a copy of that state. To do that, we have to use the spread operator to use the copy. So I have to do the spread operator. Imagine this is the state. Now this state and this state is not exactly the same. This is just a copy of it. And sometimes people call it a shallow copy. It's not exact copy. So now we could do something with this. We could change it. So we cannot change this one directly because it's the state. We have to use the set state. We don't want to do that now. We want to just add something. We need to add part of it. We don't want to change the whole thing. We just want to add, we want to change a part of it, like this title. So there's two different things. There is the adding and there's the changing. We're basically modifying when we're changing the title. And here, the set form, we're adding a completely new object in there, right? So that's just adding a new object. So it's adding a new object like this. So, but to change its state, to like modify it, like to modify the state, you first have to make a copy of it. So this is not the actual state. This is a copy of it. So we made a copy of it, and then we're changing the title and we're changing the body off of the copy. And then we're saying, okay, now take all that copy and send it to the original state. So it's basically saying, make changes to the title, make changes to the body, and then package it as like an object. And then we're using set here, set state, right? And sending this whole thing back to the here, right? And that will make it so that we added a new object, right? So it's making it easy for us to modify the state, but this is not the actual state. This is a copy of it.
So it's not combining it. It's making a copy, and it's gonna output the copy, right?
Yep.
Copy of the key, which is event.target.name.
Yep.
Right? And its value, it is the event target value. So it's making a copy of the event target value, and it's gonna output.
So the copy is actually, we're copying the state, which is this object. We're copying this object, and we're saying, okay, we need to change a part of this object, which is either the title or the body. So that's what this is doing. It's making the modification, the changes.
It's specifying which part we need to make a copy.
So this is, let me write a little bit on it. So this would be the key, and this would be the
other
value.
one is the value. Okay.
And this would be exactly the title. That would be the title, and this would be whatever we put in here.
Now it makes a little sense.
Yeah, but we make it generic so that we used a JavaScript method, which is called event.target, which
I do familiar with that one.
Yep, which targets exactly what we're clicking or what we're targeting, basically. And then we targeted the name, which is the title. It's exactly the same as this, and the value, which is whatever we input. So that's the difference. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so it takes time to completely understand, which is okay. You don't have to understand all of it right now, but try to grasp the general idea of what this is doing. Okay, the next function is, and this is basically sending the whole object, this whole object to the state. The next function is submission. So now the submission is not working because if we submit something, it refreshes, and that is the HTML way of doing something. We do not want to do that. We want to do it in a React way, which is every time you submit, we want to automatically have a box here without any refresh or anything like that. So to do that, we need to create the submission function. So we're going to say const. We're going to say const here. We're going to call it handle submit. That's the usual way to call it. We're going to give it the event here. And we're going to say in here, inside here, we need to do we're going back to our JavaScript ways. How do we stop the default functionality?
You said the event, I said prevent. Yeah, so you type evented or prevent. Evented, you know whatever you pass over there, right?
Yeah. So we
And
say
then, prevent.
Yep.
Default.
So there's a method called prevent default, and it's part of like JavaScript. So it's used to prevent any default for let's actually read it. The event interfaces prevent default method tells the user agent, which is whoever is using the website, that if the event does not get explicitly handled, its default action should not be taken as it normally would be. The event continues to propagate as usual. So what it's doing is basically what we're doing here is every time you click this button, you're creating a click event, right? So by default, that's a click event. So you clicked it, it does something. We want to prevent that. We want to stop that operation from happening. So we're going to say here, event, whatever is happening, which is the button that we clicked, prevent default, prevent default, which is a function. So now if we have to add this handle submit to the form. To add the handle submit to the form, we're going to go up here to the form, and we're going to say on submit. This is part of React. On submit is just like the on click, on change, I mean. So on submit is when we submit the form, then run this function. We're running this function. So we're kind of like going away from HTML and going to more of like the React way. So now if we go back here and we click handle submit or submit here, nothing happens. There's no refresh and nothing. That's because we're handling it here. The next thing is this does is it takes the state, this is state, which is a form node, and it sends it to a form that we're going to create here, which will add the data to the nodes state. So that's what it's going to do. So we have to give it a function here. So to do that, we have to actually create the function itself. So the function would be here. Let's just give it a name and then go back there. So this function, I wrote a note, add nodes from node form, which is a component, handle submit, which is the function we're working on, to the nodes state, which is this nodes state here. So this would be const. So let's call it something like add new node. Okay. This will take something like a node, then we'll do something. So let me double check. Yep. So it will do something here, but let's just console log node. How do we? How would this component know about that function? How would it know? Because if we do something like this, basically what we want to do is we want to call that function here. So we want to say something like add new node and then pass the state. So this is state form node here. Right? How would this function know about that? This component will know about that function. How do we pass things through components?
Props.
props. So you could pass a function through props. So in here, the node form, we're gonna pass this function to that component. So we're gonna say, we're gonna call it the same thing, add new node is equal to add new node, right? So now we go back here and we have to add props here. It's in there, props. And we have to say here, props to, no, sorry, not this, here. Props dot add new node, and then we pass the state, and that will make it so that we send it the whatever changes happens here, we're gonna send it to app.js. So now if we look at the console log, and let's give it a name here. New node, let's call it that. Save it. Go back here. And we type here something. Go to shopping. Okay. Buy milk and eggs. Right? So if we add here, it should show the object here that we're expecting. Right? So new node, it has the ID, title, and the body. The order doesn't matter when it comes to objects. So we're gonna take this and just add it to our state. Does that make sense? Any question about that? How we did this?
You're gonna pass that data to the state.
To this state, to our original state, which is the nodes. So anything we pass here will create a card automatically. All right. And we're going to use this function to pass this information to here. But before we do that, I want you to think of how did we send the data from this component to this component. Here, we just console logged it here.
You're using the prop. You use prop. So when you use prop from one component to another one, you're transferring the data through props.
Okay. Remember that props go one way, right? They go from up and down, right?
Now you're reversing it, so that makes a little bit.
Okay. Yes, that's true. We're reversing it.
Yeah.
But remember that what we're doing here is we're using a function. So when it comes to function, it's different when it comes to props. So functions carry information through components, through props, even if it's reversed, but not normal data. So normal data, like the state, cannot be sent from here to like app.js if app.js is the parent, right? And now we're using only function. So functions are okay. You could pass data through. Yep, you can pass data through props using functions. So functions are a little bit different. So that confuses people a lot. And we're basically using the props to pass the data, and then when that function runs, so when this function handle submit runs, it prevents the default, and then it runs this function, add new node. And where do we get add new node? It's located in here. And add new node is expecting something. It's expecting a parameter, which is called the node. You could call it whatever. And that parameter, we passed it here, which is an object of our state here. Okay. Does that make sense? So when it comes to functions, you could pass a data to a function, not a state, to a function through props, even if it's reverse, going back up. The only thing that's not allowed is the state. So if you pass in a data to a state, you cannot go up. Okay.
So what is the function in app.js that receive it?
this one, this function right here, we created.
Oh, okay.
Add new node. It's expecting a parameter, and we console log the parameter here. And that parameter, we passed it here, right here.
Okay.
So right
In
here.
that
Yeah. So this component knows about this function because we pass it through props. And then every time we run this function, it says, okay, send this data to this function. And this function knows where it's located. It's located in here. And it says, I need a parameter. We give it to the parameter. And then it basically console logs that parameter. So now it's easy for us to take that parameter and send it to the state. So that will be our last step. So we need to make a copy of the state, right? Just like we did here in the handle change. We make a copy of this state, which is this state, because we do not want to change the state directly. So let's do that. Let's say let new node equal to, this would be an array. So let's make a copy of the state, which is this state. So we say dot nodes, and then let's add a new data, new object. So to add a new object, we have to spread out our node, which is the parameter. So we use another spread to basically make sure that it fits. If it doesn't fit, it will give you an error. So if whatever this is expecting is not this node, then it will give you an issue, especially when you're rendering it. But so all we have to do is just, sorry, not that, and do that. All we have to do is here, we say spread node. Close this, remove this. So any question of what we did here? We copied the state. So nodes with the S is the state here. Node, this one, and we can change it whatever we want to. We can say here, new data, right? Or we can say here, new data, right?
Is
So-
that like saying event.target like name equals to event.target.value? Because it's the event, new data is the event.
So sort of, it's similar to that. We're taking the state. So this is a shallow copy of the state, this state. Now, this shallow copy would allow it to modify it. So we're not modifying directly the state, we're modifying the node, and we're adding a new object. So this is basically adding a new object like this, saying something like this on ID, giving an ID, whatever. The ID is da-da-da, and then, sorry, it's too long. I don't know what that is. And then saying, giving it the title, and then string, make it a string, and then here the body, right? We are adding a new object to,
And that new object is coming from the form, right? It's coming from the input, right? Whatever you input.
this input. Yep, this is where it comes from. And this this form input is our state right here, which is this data. And remember that this data, the way we changed it is the handle change. So the handle change, it makes it so that anything we type in is accumulated here or is kept here, and then we pass that changes to this state, and then we pass that information through this function all the way to this function, and this function takes our normal state, our original state, and says, I have a new data for you, and I have a new object, so add this object. So this is how you add it. So you take and all this stuff is in here, new data. So it adds it, and we can actually console log it. Let's actually console log so it makes sense for you guys. Console log. So let's see what new node is, which is this whole thing, right? New node. New node. Let's mark it. All right. And go back here. New node. So what is a new node? So new node is, it takes so let's actually refresh this whole thing. Okay, so let's add something here. Go to market, by clothes. So this is our new node. Okay, so when we add, actually something is missing. Oh, yeah. We said here spread. Oh yeah, we have to, sorry, we have to make this an object. So this is an object. Okay, so this is a new object. So it's not just by itself. It's a new object. So save that. Go back here, refresh everything. Go to market, buy clothes. Okay, add. So that would add a new data. That new data is this object, right? So this is object. So it is basically a copy. We're making a copy of the state, this, and we're modifying it. Think of this as a modification. So this step is modifying the state. Modifying the state, but just a copy of the state, not directly, right? That's the importance to know. You're not modifying directly the state. You're copying it, and you're modifying the copy. And this is the way to modify it, by getting the state, and then whatever you want to change, you can change it here. So remember in our note in here, we changed the title and the body. So this is basically a dynamic way to target the title and the body. And we copied the state, we changed the title and the body. It's exactly the same thing. So now we're just going to take this copy and send it to the state. How do we do that? Set, okay. Set notes.
And you open the bracket.
Uh-huh.
And
Do we open? Okay, so basically this is what we're trying to send it, right? So we could just say new note. That's what we're sending, new note. So now if we save it, this should create a card automatically. So whatever we put in here, it should create a card. Like that. We put something here. Also, we have to clear up this. It's easy way to clear that is by going back to the notes here and going to handle submit. I'm saying here form, same form note, and then doing that. Oh, actually, we have to make an object here. Yep. Form note. Okay, maybe just that. I don't think I wrote that in my notes. Let's see. No, I haven't. I think this is the way. So refresh. Okay. So write something here, send. Form node. Isn't that? Oh, set. Okay, this is set. Set form node because we're changing the state. So to do that, we just a string is fine. Okay. So now if we say submit again, should have refreshed, should have changed this, but that's fine. So after we send it, we need to say set, and then and then create an empty object. Okay, let's give it an empty object like that, and that will make it so that every time we add something, this clears out like that. Okay, so add more, adds more. That's it. Yeah. So any question about what we just did? Anything you wanted me to explain more? Remember that this function is basically sending the object that we submitted, whatever we submit here, it's sending it to this state. And that state, every time you have anything in this state, we're mapping over it right here. We're mapping over it, and we're rendering that data as a note card. Any question? So this is, yeah, go ahead.
If you go back to the node forms,
Mm-hmm.
and
Node form, yeah.
if you go down a little bit right there,
Yeah.
line 15, line 15.
Line 15, yeah.
So that array event dot target now, is that like a default, default syntax?
Which one? The event dot target?
Yeah, event dot target name and then value, the event dot target that value. You always put like that, write it down like that.
Yes, you always put it like this. The reason for that is in the form, in the input, you have to have a name and you have to have a value. If you don't have those two, it will not work. So if you have these two, if you have the name, and the name has to be exactly the same as the state. So the state will have a title. So if we have another input, then we have to name it whatever the state is. So what you need to have is the name and the value and then the unchanged. So those are the three things that are essential for input. The rest are just okay. I mean, type, of course, you need to have a type. So type, name, value, and unchanged. Those are the most important parts. And also the value would be the state. So it will be like your state dot title, right?
Duran, I just want to know how much is left because I have to go right now. I'm gonna rewatch the video tonight. Inshallah.
We don't have much. We don't have anything left right now. I'm just gonna go over the assignment and then
Yeah.
if you I'm gonna answer any question and then we're gonna go over the assignment, inshallah.
Okay. Is it okay if I go now? I'm gonna
Yeah.
rewatch like the video.
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
leave
Thank
now.
you. Okay.
Mhm.
Thanks.
No problem. Take care. Any question, guys?
You too.
So that makes it like dynamic.
Yeah, so this makes it dynamic so that we don't have to target a title first. Title, or this would be, yeah, title, and that would be the state here, this title. So now if we actually do this, this will work only for the title. So we could do this and we could actually copy this and comma, do baddie here. This will work normally. So if we save this, go back to here, refresh everything, go to market. As you can see, it's basically the value is exactly the same. So it doesn't know what it's actually targeting. Let me see. I think we have to fix something here. Title, okay, baddie. That would be okay, and then the value. So the value would be each one of them. I'm not sure why it's typing the same thing in here. If we submit, yeah, it's going to be the same. But let's see. So value. So these are two exactly the same. Now we have to differentiate these two. So to differentiate, we have to say, let's see. No, I think we have to actually just make the baddie another. We have to make another variable for it, like this. So we have to create something. We have to say this one like title input, and then create let baddie input, and then create something like it, like this, but with the baddie. So this would be baddie. And you have to take these two and turn them into a object, both of them, and then put it in here. All right. Then that's how you can handle. So, and then if you have more here, you have to create a new variable for it, each one of them. And that could be very difficult if you have a lot of them. Yeah, if you have a lot of them, that would be difficult. So an easier way would be just to say event.name and then event.value. Event.target that value, event.name that value, that name. So this is, I'll put this in an array because it's the key. So when you have an object, the key cannot be something that like something dot and then dot. It cannot be like, it has to be one thing. So that's why we have an array here.
Okay, so I know event is whatever you pass, right?
Yep. So let's console log event itself so you guys can see exactly what is happening. So event I think it would be easier if we say event.target. Otherwise, you'll get a lot of information. So let's say event.target here. Let's say event target, give it a name, and save this. Let's check that out. Exactly what that is. So now if we click this, you will see that if we add anything here, so let's say new, the event.target is the input itself, right? So the input itself, the input.id, all this stuff, title, and then the value is whatever we put in here, as you can see. So if we add something else, new title, as you can see, the value is changing. So the whole event.target is the whole input. If we go to here and clear this, and go here and say, let's add. So you can see here, the event target is the text area, and what's changing is the inside of the text area. Right? Does that make sense?
What happened?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but what just happened? I didn't see it. Can you go back to the console log?
So I was showing here. Do you see the console log here?
Yeah, there's a lot of other stuff that coming up.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is the event.target is the input. This whole input is event.target one. That's what it is. So what do we console log in here? What do we console log in here is the whole input. So that's what we console log in. So sorry about that. So we're console logging the whole input, and now the text area is the baddie. So the text area is this part, right? So if we say here event.target.value, what do you think it's gonna come up?
That's the new thing you put in there.
A new thing?
Whatever
What do you
Whatever
mean?
you type. Whatever you type.
Okay. What do you mean by new thing? Oh, okay. So whatever I type, right? That's what you mean.
Yeah. Yep.
So whatever I type, that's what's gonna come up. So the first part, which says event target, is just the title of the console log. So we should say something like this.
So what's the target? The target mean the whole element, HTML element.
Yeah, it's the whole HTML element. So whatever I type here is gonna come up. And if I remove this part where it says, maybe this is confusing you, if I remove this part, save it, run it again, and I type something, you only get what you type. If we change this to name, what do you think we're gonna get if we type something here? We change it
The
to
name
name.
of the text area. Or
The
title?
name of the input. So each input has a name, right? So the name of it, that's what we're gonna get. So this would be a title, this would be baddie. So if we type here something, we're just gonna get title, as you can see, and it's counting how many times we're gonna get it. So like that, title. And if we go down here, we type something, it's baddie. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's what event.target is. It's basically whatever we're targeting is event.target. So this event.target.name is the title or baddie, and event.target.value is whatever we type. And we're replacing that with these two. So we make a copy of the whole thing and then pass it back to the state. So that the state will become the whole object, this whole object. Any more question? Anything that's confusing? I understand like it takes time, but yeah, just more practice in the assignment, and inshallah, that will definitely help. All right, let's go. Let's just look around and see if anything else is confusing. Okay, so let's go over the assignment for tomorrow. So go all the way down here. The assignment is you guys gonna start from scratch. I think some of you started. As you can see here, there's like 6 forks. That means there's 6 people that forked. Maybe I'm included there. But yeah, you can copy this fork it. It's an empty directory, empty folder. So you have to say npx create React app and all that. Follow these instructions and create your own React app. Call it team builder or team builder, form team builder, whatever you want to call it. It's up to you. Then after that, you basically have to create a state with members. So list of team members in this state, render that in your app. And then you have to build a form. So create a component called, call it form.js. You need to keep track of 3 things: name, email, and role. Role could be something like backend engineer, front-end engineer, something like that, designer. So it could be something like that. And then you need to allow the person to submit the form, and then you need to show the information that was submitted right underneath the form, just like we did today in here. Okay. So read the instructions, make sure you understand. Task 3 is a stretch. So that means we need to like edit. So that would be, if we submit here, give it a button here to edit, so you can edit it. So that would be stretch. You don't have to do it. Just make sure you finish the MVP, which is a form and a list of users. Any question?
So basically, we're gonna have two components, right?
Yes, 2 components. Yes, you will have one component to show the members, so member list, and then the other component will be the form one, which will have a form, and that the form will add new members. So one member is an object, so it needs to have a name, email, and a role. So you could create a fake data of a list, just like we did here when we were doing the first time. So we added something here, so you could add like a fake data here. So give it an ID, member, a name, role, all that stuff, couple of people, so that you can render those, and then after that, create your form. Right? Any question?
You said member.
Yeah, members. Yeah. So here, member list. So team members. That's
Okay, so but you're gonna have name, email, and role, right?
Yep, name, email, and role here. Says here. Yeah. So, and also when it comes to creating this in the form, you could make it like a drop down. So it's a little more, something different than what we did, but it's going to be a drop down, and you have to keep track of that drop down. So this would be a little bit more challenging than what we did. So you have to do your own research and stuff like that. If you're stuck,
the role has to be a drop down.
Yep, it has to show something like backend engineer, front-end engineer, designer.
You mean like when you click it and it opens up like a couple options down?
Yeah, it gives you a couple options. So you could look into like HTML drop downs, HTML drop down. So it's just a basic drop down. Yeah, it's a select element. So like this. So you can have something like that. So you have to keep track of these, and you already defined them. So you could define them in this state if you want already, and then render them that way. So search that, look for that in the internet. How do you render, or how do you keep track of an input in React? So that's one of the things about the assignments, is that it doesn't, I'm not giving you exact the same thing we did in the assignment. So I want you to like do your own little bit of research. If you're completely stuck, let me know, inshallah. I can direct you to right direction.
So those tips help us. We can look for it, inshallah. We can try.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, mashallah. So any other question before we close out? All right, inshallah. Take care. Have a good day. You have to tomorrow and the day after. And also I'm gonna send a poll where you guys gonna vote on. I think Zakaria said he had a question about the 2 days assignment. Maybe you can, Zakaria, you could do it in 1 day. So we're gonna revisit that. Let's see what everybody votes, inshallah. I think most people like the 2 days, but inshallah, if we do 1 day, it's gonna go faster and it's gonna finish faster. If we do 2 days, it's gonna take longer, but it helps kind of like it helps the person to grasp the ideas and something like that. So yeah, I'll send that out and you guys can vote, inshallah. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow or the day after, inshallah, whenever you have any questions. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.